All right, we're opening an investigative file today on a piece of tech that is frankly changing the very definition of policing on our streets. We're doing a full briefing on Mobile Fortify, a surveillance tool that's putting immense power into the hands of federal agents.
And we have to start here, with the human cost. Because before we get into the tech, the databases, the algorithms, you need to understand what this feels like on the ground. For Jesus Gutierrez, a U.S. citizen, his encounter with Mobile Fortify wasn't just some minor delay. He described the experience of being stopped and scanned on a Chicago street for an hour as feeling like he'd been kidnapped.
So what is this thing? Well, Mobile Fortify is basically a smartphone app issued to ICE agents. It lets them take a photo of your face, scan your fingerprints, and right there on the spot, run your biometrics against this massive tangled web of government data. What it really does is it takes the concept of the border and makes it portable. Any street corner can become a biometric checkpoint in an instant.
So here's our roadmap for this briefing. We're going to start with that street-level reality, then we'll tear down the tech to see how it works. After that, we open the case file, all the documented risks. Then we'll look at how communities are fighting back. And finally, we'll grapple with what all of this means for the future.
Okay, Section 1, the street-level scan. We're going to use one person's story to really understand how this huge, nationwide system actually plays out in the real world.
So let's go back to Jesus Gutierrez. He's our case study. A young American citizen walking home from the gym. He gets stopped, no reason given. He doesn't have his wallet on him, but you know what? It wouldn't have mattered. They used Mobile Fortify to verify him, and that process took an entire hour of his life. This is a perfect example of what critics are calling Kavano stops, where someone is stopped based on how they look, and then the technology is used after the fact to justify the stop itself.
That encounter on the street really shows you the power of this system. So for our next section, let's go behind the curtain. Let's get inside the digital dragnet and really deconstruct how this thing actually works.
The engine under the hood of this app is a piece of proprietary software from the NEC Corporation called NeoFace. Now, in the surveillance industry, it has a reputation for being fast and, in lab settings, very accurate. And that phrase, in lab settings, is a huge red flag we're going to come back to.
Now, looking at the specs here, a couple of things should jump out at you. First, it does one-to-many matching. That means it's taking your face and comparing it against an entire database of people, not just looking for one specific person. But here's the real kicker. Look at the minimum resolution. It only needs 24 pixels between the eyes to try and make a match. That is an incredibly low bar for a scan that's happening on a dimly lit street with a shaky hand.
And that brings us to the app's single most powerful feature. From a privacy and Fourth Amendment standpoint, this is probably the most alarming part, something called the superquery.
The superquery is what makes this a digital dragnet. See, when an agent scans your face, it doesn't just check one database. It blasts out a query that simultaneously hits federal criminal records, your state's driver's license photos, a massive DHS system that tracks travel and financial data. And they're even working on hooking it up to private data brokers like LexisNexis. It collapses all these separate silos of information into a single profile about you in seconds.
And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, the main DHS database that this system is built on, IDEN, holds over 270 million biometric records. That's just the starting point before it queries all those other systems. The sheer volume of data is just staggering.
Okay, so that brings us to Section 3, the case file. This is where we lay out the evidence, and we expose the huge chasm between what this tech promises in a lab and how it actually performs in the real world.
And right here, this is the core problem. In a controlled lab with perfect lighting, a high-res camera, and a person staring straight ahead, yeah, the algorithm is shockingly accurate. But on the street, with bad lighting, someone moving, weird angles, and just a regular phone camera, that accuracy completely falls off a cliff. Selling lab results as real-world performance is the first and biggest red flag.
And the list of known issues is long. We know the algorithm has higher error rates for women and people of color. We know the databases it's pulling from, like the FBI's, are riddled with errors. A DHS audit literally found the system is vulnerable to cyber attacks. But maybe the most shocking thing of all, there is no dedicated privacy impact assessment for this specific app. For a tool this invasive, that is a massive procedural failure. It's almost unbelievable.
So this is where it gets really dangerous. It's a policy issue. According to congressional testimony, ICE policy allows an agent to treat a match from this flawed app as a definitive determination. What does that mean? It means the app's conclusion can be treated as more valid than a physical birth certificate you might be holding in your hand. It's giving the final say to a faulty algorithm.
And what happens to the data from innocent people, from U.S. citizens like Jesus Gutierrez? Their photos, captured during these stops, are stored in a DHS targeting system for 15 years. Think about that. A brief, baseless stop on the street, and your face is in a government database for a decade and a half. Now, all of these documented risks have thankfully sparked a response. So, Section 4, let's look at the community defense and resistance that's happening on a bunch of different fronts.
People are pushing for accountability. At the city level, you have things like New York City's Post Act, which forces transparency on police surveillance tech. Federally, groups like the EFF are filing lawsuits to force the government to release information. And at the state level, places like New York are actually debating outright bans on this kind of technology.
So what can you do? What are the actionable steps? First, and this is the most important one, use a strong passcode on your phone. Not your face, not your fingerprint. Why? Because legally, you have stronger protections against being forced to give up a password than you do against them using your face or finger. Second, you can reduce your data trail. On Android, delete your advertising ID. On iOS, turn off app tracking. This makes it harder for data brokers to collect the kind of information that might end up in these government systems.
And that brings us to our final section, where we have to look at the big picture, the biometric checkpoint society, and the huge unanswered constitutional questions this all raises.
Believe it or not, there's actually a ticking clock here. DHS itself has classified Mobile Fortify as a high-impact AI tool, and under their own rules, that means by April 2026, it has to meet certain minimum risk management standards. Right now, those standards, those fail-safes, they just don't exist.
And you have to understand, this technology is not standing still. The whole system is being migrated to a new, even more powerful platform called HEART. And HEART is being designed from the ground up to handle more biometrics, including things like iris scans and, yes, even DNA. The dragnet is only getting wider.
Which leaves us with this. This is the question we have to answer. Mobile Fortify makes the border a portable, digital thing that can be set up on any street at any time. So if the border is everywhere, what's left of our Fourth Amendment rights? Where does our right to privacy even begin?